Easter is approaching, so it's time to think about making hot cross buns, I guess. They go along with Easter. And the gold standard in making hot cross buns is my Aunt Effie. Aunt Effie is now 101. Well, she will be 101 Easter Sunday. And her hot cross buns are the best I've ever had. The ingredients I've got laid out here is a half a cup. I'm using currants. You could use raisins or craisins. Those are the dried cranberries, I guess, aren't they? Yes. 3/4 of a cup of warm milk, a half a cup of white sugar, a 1/4 cup, 4 tablespoons of softened butter, and 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. And I'm using the instant yeast. There'll be a link below the video for the recipe, and in the recipe they use the standard dry yeast, and so they're proving it in some milk and sugar and whatever before they use it. With instant yeast that isn't necessary, so I won't be going through that part. 2 large eggs beaten, 3 1/2 cups of unsifted all-purpose flour, and the seasonings are a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon and 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground nutmeg. So let's get the stand mixer here and get started in this. I didn't know, I mentioned that these are currants. Did I say that they're in a cup of boiling water to plump them up? And before they go in the mix, the water is drained and you dry the currants off on paper towels so that they won't be wet and soggy in the dough. I'm using the batter or beating attachment to start with. I'll be switching to the dough hook before it's finished here, but to get things started, putting the butter in first. The sugar. And the warm milk. These things will get beaten until they are combined. And that's pretty well combined. Now I add the 2 well-beaten eggs. And in my case, the instant yeast and the 2 spices, nutmeg and cinnamon. And we'll combine that a bit. Now, the spatula. Switching now to the dough hook, I guess. If I get the butter off of this beater, don't want to waste the butter. And we'll start adding the flour. A cup or so at a time to get started. May not need it all, so I add it gradually. I want to take the spatula out of there, Dale, before you turn that on. That could be a disaster. Well, I did use all of the flour, and now it needs for 8 to 10 minutes to make a firm and elastic dough. Now, for the last minute or so of the kneading, add in the currants that have been drained and patted dry, and just get those incorporated into the dough. I did turn it out onto the pastry board with some flour and finished hand kneading the currants into the dough. The stand mixer didn't seem to be doing a very good job. That was just a little olive oil. I can grease the bowl and oil the dough at the same time. Now it gets covered and sits at room temperature for an hour and a half until it's double in bulk. I let it rise almost 2 hours, I guess. Didn't seem to have doubled in bulk, so I let it go a little longer. And now it has to be divided into 12 equal portions, and I tend to do that with scales. You can do it by eyesight, but I never have much luck with it. So that's roughly 3 ounces each, I guess, will do. Yeah, that's 3 ounces there. So. And shape each one into a ball. Then they go into a greased dish. I'll show you what they look like when I get them all in there. Well, it didn't take too long to shape them. And now they get covered and put in a warm place for at least half an hour, or until they have almost doubled in size. They don't have to completely fill the container because they will get a little more rise in the oven, but you want them to rise up quite a bit and get puffy, so to speak. I'll bring you back when they're ready to go in the oven. Well, they have been rising for well over an hour. And finally got some size to them. For some reason they seem quite slow, to me anyway. I think they'll be alright. And now they get brushed with an egg wash, which is just one whole egg beaten with some water. To make it a little more spreadable, I guess is the idea of the water. Once I get them brushed, the oven has been preheated at 375 degrees, and they bake for, it says, 15 to 17 minutes. I prefer to say until done. But I should think less than 20. I was chatting away to you and didn't realize that the camera had shut off. I guess the battery was dead. I've got it plugged in now, charging it anyway. But what I was just about to say, these are going in the oven. I guess I already told you the temperature and the time and whatever. I'll give you a look at what they look like when they come out. Hopefully they're done. I left them in the oven for another 5 minutes or so. I looked at the bottom of them. One advantage to using a glass baking dish, they didn't look done on the bottom to me, but now the tops are getting quite brown. I don't want them to burn. So they have to almost completely cool before you put the cross glaze on. So once that's happened, I'll bring you back. Well, the glaze is just simply, I think, a half cup of icing sugar and a couple of teaspoons of milk. I mixed up pretty near a double batch. I'll probably still run out. Sort of have what I thought was a nice story anyway that goes along with these. Many years ago, my first trip to England, I was in Canterbury, and at that time there was a little hotel called the Cathedral Gate Hotel. The hotel is still there. I was in Canterbury a few years ago, and the ground floor of the little hotel, I stayed in the hotel actually, it was there in the time of Chaucer. The ground floor was a bakery coffee shop, and when I went back a couple of years ago, the ground floor is still a coffee shop. It's a Starbucks coffee shop, so I didn't even bother going in. But I remember being in there, and they had hot cross buns. We were there close to Easter, and a woman brought in an elderly lady to buy her a treat, and the treat was one hot cross bun. And the lady was so very pleased with it. I've always remembered that. Didn't seem to me like it was a big thing, but the elderly lady was so glad to get her hot cross bun. Well, now I have got to try one of these. I think I'll have this one right here on the corner. Well, they certainly are light and airy enough. Very good. I wasn't sure there was enough cinnamon when I was making them, but you can taste the cinnamon quite nicely. And that nice sweet glaze. And the currants are all through it. Not that difficult to make. It took a little bit of time to get them to rise, so you've got plenty of time between now and Easter to make your hot cross buns. Thank you very much for watching.